There was a time in my life when the future felt sealed shut. Not dramatically, not in a way that invited sympathy, but quietly, relentlessly, the way doors close without sound. I did not wake up one morning and declare that I had failed. Failure announced itself slowly, through numbers that no longer added up, through conversations I avoided, through nights where sleep came late and left early. I began one year with nothing. Less than nothing, really. Debt where savings should have been, obligations where options should have existed, and a growing awareness that the life I thought I was building had quietly collapsed while I was busy surviving. People talk about rock bottom as if it is a single moment, an explosion, a breakdown, a public fall. That is rarely how it happens. Rock bottom, in my experience, is quieter. It is waking up and realizing that every decision available to you is defensive, that you are no longer choosing a future, only postponing disaster, that you are spending energy not on growth, but on containment. At that point, motivation is useless, hope is unreliable, inspiration fades quickly when the numbers do not move. What you need then is not belief. What you need is a plan. Looking back now, decades later, I can see something clearly that I could not see at the time. Starting with nothing was not my greatest disadvantage. It was the fact that I had no structure for climbing out. I was reacting, improvising, copying behaviors from people who were themselves trapped, just further along the same road. Most people who begin a year broke believe their problem is money. It is not. Money is a symptom. The real problem is confusion. They wake up every day unsure of what matters most, unsure of what to prioritize, unsure of which actions actually move the needle and which only create the illusion of progress. So they stay busy, they stay tired, they stay hopeful, and nothing changes. I am telling you this now because if you are starting a year with little or nothing, whether that means an empty bank account, mounting debt, or simply the feeling that you are far behind, you are standing at a point most people never truly face, a point where excuses no longer work, but clarity has not yet arrived. This moment can break you, or it can free you. That depends entirely on whether you understand what starting from zero actually means. When you have nothing, you also have something rare: flexibility. You are not protecting a lifestyle. You are not defending a reputation built on appearances. You are not constrained by the fear of losing what you do not yet have. That fear, the fear of regression, is what traps many people who look successful from the outside. They earn well, but they spend nearly everything. They appear stable, but they are fragile, one disruption away from collapse. You are not in that position, and that is an advantage if you choose to use it. Another truth few people will tell you: mistakes are cheapest at the beginning. When you have nothing, experimentation costs very little. Trying and failing does not ruin you, it educates you. The same errors that would devastate someone with a large portfolio or heavy obligations are survivable when your exposure is low. Yet most people starting from nothing do the opposite of what this reality demands. They become cautious in the wrong ways. They avoid effort, not risk. They cling to comfort, not strategy. They spend what little they have on small pleasures, telling themselves they deserve relief, while denying themselves the one thing that could actually change their situation: disciplined action over time. Time is the quiet enemy here. People misunderstand how time works when they are struggling. They believe another month will not matter, another year will not matter. They assume they can afford delay because nothing catastrophic happens immediately. But financial damage compounds invisibly. Every year spent reacting instead of building reduces future flexibility. Every year without a plan hardens habits that become harder to break later. This is why I am skeptical of motivational language. Motivation is emotional. It spikes and fades. It cannot carry you through months of unglamorous repetitive effort. Structure can. What saved me was not optimism. It was the moment I stopped asking how to feel better and started asking what to do next, specifically, concretely, and without negotiation. I stopped thinking in years. I started thinking in months. I stopped asking what would make me happy. I started asking what would make me solvent. I stopped looking for a breakthrough. I started building a foundation.
And here's the part most people miss. The plan did not care about the economy. It did not care about markets. It did not depend on favorable conditions or external permission. It worked in good times and bad times because it was built around behavior, not predictions. If you are waiting for clarity before you act, you will wait forever. Clarity follows movement, not the other way around. This is uncomfortable to accept, especially if you are already tired. When you are behind, every additional demand feels unfair. You look around and see others who seem to have started earlier, received help, or simply gotten lucky, and that comparison can paralyze you. But comparison is a luxury of people who are not moving. When you are executing a plan, you are too busy to measure yourself against others. You are focused on the next step, the next metric, the next decision that actually matters. Let me be clear about something before we go further. This is not a story about becoming rich quickly. It is a story about becoming stable deliberately. Wealth is a consequence, not a starting point. Anyone who promises otherwise is selling you hope in exchange for attention. What I am describing is slower, harder, less exciting, and far more reliable. It begins with accepting a simple, uncomfortable truth. If you are starting from nothing, you cannot afford to live like someone who has something. You must temporarily reject cultural norms that equate spending with self-worth and busyness with progress. You must be willing to look unreasonable to people who are themselves trapped in cycles they do not question. Most people will not do this. They will say they are ready for change, but only if it does not disrupt their routines, only if it does not require discomfort, only if it does not challenge their identity. Those conditions guarantee failure. Real change begins when you decide that short-term discomfort is preferable to long-term anxiety, when you choose discipline not as punishment, but as leverage. I learned this the hard way. There were months where nothing felt rewarding, months where the only visible progress was that things were no longer getting worse. That may not sound inspiring, but it's profound. Stopping decline is the first victory. Growth comes later. And once growth begins, it accelerates quietly. People imagine financial turnaround as a dramatic reversal, a sudden influx of money, a single opportunity that changes everything. That rarely happens. What happens often is subtler. Expenses drop, income rises incrementally, stress decreases, decisions improve, momentum builds. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. From the inside, everything is changing. This is why starting from zero is not the end of the story. It is the cleanest possible starting point. No illusions, no inflated expectations, no dependence on maintaining appearances. You are forced to deal with reality as it is. And reality, once confronted honestly, becomes workable. The plan I am about to outline was not designed to impress anyone. It was designed to function under pressure. It assumes you will be tired. It assumes you will doubt yourself. It assumes the world will not pause to accommodate your intentions. It also assumes something else, that you are capable of sustained effort when you understand why it matters. If you are looking for a quick fix, this will disappoint you. If you are looking for a way to rebuild your financial life from the ground up, methodically, predictably, and with increasing control, then this will feel uncomfortably familiar because it requires you to take responsibility in places where you may have previously outsourced it to hope. The year ahead does not need to be perfect. It needs to be consistent. You do not need to transform your identity. You need to change your behavior.
You do not need confidence. You need repetition. Starting from nothing strips away fantasy. It leaves you with action. That is not a punishment, it is clarity. And clarity, when acted upon daily, is more powerful than any amount of motivation. What follows is not a story of luck. It is a sequence of decisions, small, deliberate, and often boring, that compound into stability, then into opportunity, and eventually into wealth. But it all begins here. Not at the top, not with success, but with honesty and the willingness to move forward without waiting to feel ready. Section 1. January. Stop the bleeding. January is not the month where you build wealth. January is the month where you decide whether you will continue losing. Most people misunderstand this. They enter a new year thinking in terms of goals, visions, and outcomes. They imagine growth before they have stopped decay.
They talk about investments, side businesses, and future versions of themselves while their present reality is quietly draining them. If you are starting the year with nothing, or close to it, your financial life is not stagnant, it is moving backward. And the first rule of survival is simple: stop the bleeding before you try to heal. Bleeding finances behave like bleeding bodies. You do not ask about long-term fitness when someone is hemorrhaging. You apply pressure, you stabilize, you prevent further loss. Only then does recovery become possible. January is pressure. This is the month where you must be honest in ways most people avoid for years. Honest not in an emotional sense, but in a numerical one. The numbers do not care about your intentions. They do not respond to motivation. They reflect behavior, and behavior leaves traces. The first thing I learned, painfully, is that most people do not actually know where their money goes. They have impressions, stories, explanations that sound reasonable, but when asked to list every place money leaves their life, they hesitate, they generalize, they guess. Guessing is a luxury you can no longer afford. In January, you write everything down, every recurring expense, every subscription, every habit that quietly extracts money in exchange for momentary comfort. Not because you enjoy deprivation, but because visibility creates leverage. There is something unsettling about seeing your financial life on paper. It removes ambiguity. It exposes contradictions. You see how often you tell yourself you are barely spending, while the totals suggest otherwise. You see how many small expenses, harmless in isolation, combine into a steady drain. This is where most people stop. They look, feel uncomfortable, and retreat. They tell themselves they will adjust gradually. Gradual adjustment feels humane, but when you're already behind, gradual is indistinguishable from never. January is not about gradual. January is about decisive. You do not negotiate with expenses that do not serve survival or progress. You remove them. This feels extreme to people who have never truly been at risk. They will tell you that you need balance, that you cannot cut everything, that life is meant to be enjoyed. And they're right, eventually. But enjoyment funded by debt is not enjoyment. It is borrowing relief from the future and charging interest to your anxiety. When you're broke, every dollar has a job. If a dollar does not keep you alive, employed, or moving forward, it is unemployed capital. And unemployed capital is a liability when you have none to spare. This is the mindset shift that defines January. You stop asking whether something is affordable and start asking whether it is necessary. These are not the same question. A car payment may be affordable. That does not make it necessary. A subscription may be cheap. That does not make it essential. Outing eat may be enjoyable. That does not make it strategic. You are not punishing yourself. You are reallocating resources. One of the most difficult decisions for people is transportation. Cars carry emotional weight far beyond their utility. They symbolize independence, status, progress. But when you're starting from nothing, symbolism is expensive. If you have a car payment, January forces a hard question. Is this vehicle helping you escape your situation or helping you maintain an image while you sink? Most people already know the answer before they ask. Selling a car feels like regression. In reality, it is often liberation. Monthly payments disappear, insurance drops, mental bandwidth clears. What remains is transportation, not prestige, not comfort, but function. Is enough for now. The same principle applies everywhere else. Food is another area where denial thrives. People underestimate food spending more than almost any other category. They remember the grocery bill, but forget the coffee, the snacks, the convenience purchases that fill the gaps between meals. January simplifies this brutally. You eat at home, you cook basic food, you repeat meals. You remove decision fatigue from eating so you can apply that energy elsewhere. This is not a culinary philosophy, it is resource management. There is a strange resistance people feel toward this level of simplicity. They equate repetition with deprivation. In reality, repetition creates stability. When your meals are predictable, your spending becomes predictable. Predictability is the foundation of control. Entertainment is another quiet leak. Subscriptions are designed to feel harmless. $10 here, $15 there. Individually insignificant, collectively corrosive. January treats them all the same. Gone. Not because entertainment is evil, but because attention is finite. If you are trying to rebuild your financial life, distraction is expensive. You do not need to be entertained while your foundation is cracking. You need to be focused. Libraries still exist, so does silence, so does boredom. Boredom used correctly becomes reflection. Reflection becomes clarity. People often ask whether this level of cutting is sustainable. The answer is no, and that's the point. January is not about sustainability. January is about interruption. You are interrupting patterns that led you here. Sustainability comes later when you have leverage. What you are doing in January is proving something to yourself, that you are capable of living below your means, not just talking about it. That proof matters more than the money itself. There is a psychological shift that occurs when you realize that you can survive on less than you thought. Fear loses some of its grip. Scarcity stops screaming and starts whispering. You gain confidence not from abundance, but from competence. That competence carries forward. Another critical part of January is the elimination of financial self-deception. This includes stories you tell yourself to justify spending. I need this to function. This keeps me sane. This is my one indulgence. These phrases sound harmless. They are not. They allow spending to bypass scrutiny. January requires that every dollar pass through inspection. This can feel harsh, even cruel, especially if you've been under pressure for a long time, especially if spending has been your coping mechanism. It's important to acknowledge that. Money habits are emotional habits. Cutting expenses can feel like cutting comfort. But comfort that keeps you stuck is not comfort. It is sedation. January is about waking up. There will be moments when you feel resentment, when you feel deprived, when you wonder why others seem to enjoy things you are denying yourself. This is where perspective matters. You are not abstaining forever. You are investing 1 month, just 1 month, into changing the trajectory of your year. Most people cannot tolerate short-term discomfort, so they accept long-term stress. You are choosing the opposite.
Another overlooked aspect of January is identity. When you stop spending the way you used to, you confront who you thought you were. The person who went out, who consumed, who participated in certain social rituals. Letting go of those behaviors can feel like losing parts of yourself, but identity built on consumption is fragile. Identity built on discipline endures. January strips you down to essentials. That includes essential relationships. Some social interactions revolve entirely around spending. When you remove spending, those interactions fade. This is painful but informative. It reveals which connections were transactional and which were genuine. You do not need to announce your changes. You do not need to explain yourself. You simply act. Those who matter will adjust. Those who cannot were never part of the foundation you are building. By the end of January, the goal is not to feel good. The goal is to feel stable. Stability does not mean abundance. It means knowing that you are no longer accelerating toward disaster. It means that when you look at your accounts, nothing surprises you. It means that your spending aligns with your intention, even if your intention is modest. This alignment is powerful. Once alignment exists, progress becomes measurable. You can see how much you save per week. You can predict outcomes. You can plan. Planning requires predictability, and predictability begins with controlled spending. Most people skip this step. They jump straight to earning more, assuming income will fix everything. Income helps, but without controlled outflow, higher income simply raises the ceiling on bad habits. January prevents that mistake. This month teaches you a skill more valuable than any investment strategy: expense mastery. You learn how to live deliberately,
how to distinguish wants from needs, how to delay gratification without panic. These are not financial tricks, they are behavioral foundations. And foundations matter because everything that comes next, working harder, earning more, investing smarter, will fail without them. By the end of January, you should be tired but clearer, restricted but calmer. You may not have much money, but you will have something better: control. Control is the first form of wealth. It does not impress anyone. It does not show up on social media. It does not feel glamorous, but it changes how you move through the world. When you are no longer bleeding, you can finally redirect energy from survival to construction. January does not make you rich. January makes you possible. And possibility, once created, compounds.
These 2 months are the furnace where discipline is forged. Many people quit here. They convince themselves that the effort is unsustainable, that they deserve relief. Relief comes later. Right now, you are building the engine that will eventually carry you forward without constant strain. February and March are not about balance, they are about breakthrough. When April arrives, you will not feel like the same person who entered January. You will have scars of effort, yes, but also clarity, confidence, and cash. And for the first time in a long while, the future will feel negotiable instead of predetermined. That is the real product of aggressive income expansion. Not money alone, but leverage over your life. Section 3. April to June. Building the emergency wall. By the time April arrives, something subtle but important has changed. You are no longer in free fall. The panic that once hovered quietly in the background has softened, not disappeared, but loosened its grip. Money has entered your life again, not as a miracle, but as a result of effort. And that distinction matters, because money earned deliberately carries a different psychological weight than money stumbled into. This is where most people make their first serious mistake. They feel momentum and assume they are ready to accelerate. They confuse movement with stability. They want to reward themselves. They want to invest. They want to do something smart with the money they finally see accumulating. This impulse is understandable and dangerous. April is where discipline becomes non-negotiable. Up to this point, you were surviving and pushing. Now you are building. And the first thing you build is not wealth. It is defense against chaos, defense against interruption, defense against the one certainty life never negotiates with: something will go wrong. People who have never truly lacked money underestimate the importance of cash. They treat it as inefficient, lazy, unproductive. They talk about opportunity cost and inflation as if numbers exist in isolation from human behavior. But when you have lived with financial fragility, you understand something they do not. The absence of cash creates fear, and fear distorts decision-making. The purpose of the emergency wall is not return, it is relief. Relief from urgency, relief from constant calculation, relief from the fear that a single event, a car issue, a medical bill, a job disruption can erase months of progress overnight. Without this wall, every plan you make rests on a fault line. April through June is where you refuse to build on sand. This period is deliberately boring. It lacks excitement by design. You continue working, you continue saving, you continue living below your means. But now the effort has a different flavor. You are no longer chasing income with desperation. You are stacking protection with intention. Each dollar added to the emergency wall is a brick. Alone, a brick feels insignificant. Together, they form something solid enough to lean on. What changes first is not your net worth, but your nervous system. You stop checking your account compulsively. You stop bracing for impact. Your thinking slows, and in that slower space, better decisions emerge. There is a psychological shift that occurs when you know you can survive without income for a few months. It changes how you show up at work. You are less afraid, less reactive, less willing to tolerate mistreatment. That confidence often translates into better opportunities, not because you seek them, but because you are no longer broadcasting desperation. This is why the emergency wall is not optional, it is foundational. During these months, you may feel tempted to allocate money elsewhere, a market opportunity, a business idea, a purchase that promises efficiency or comfort. Each temptation carries a story, each story sounds reasonable, and each one undermines the wall if acted on too early. You learn to say no, not because you lack imagination, but because you respect sequence. There is an order to building a life. Skip steps and the structure collapses under its own ambition. April through June teaches patience, not passive waiting, but disciplined restraint. You are still earning, still moving, but you are deliberately resisting the urge to optimize before stabilizing. This restraint is rare. Most people have never practiced it. They oscillate between deprivation and indulgence, never staying in one place long enough to compound its benefits. These months break that cycle. You stay, you hold, you reinforce. Something else happens here that is easy to miss. As your emergency wall grows, your relationship with risk recalibrates. Risk no longer feels existential, it becomes contextual. You can evaluate opportunities based on merit rather than fear. You stop asking, "What if this fails?" and start asking, "Is this worth the risk relative to my buffer?" This is how rational decision-making is born. The wall also protects you from yourself, from impulsive spending disguised as reward, from overconfidence fueled by early wins, from the seductive belief that struggle is behind you. It is not behind you yet, but it is no longer hunting you either. Living lean during this phase is easier than in January. You are not cutting anymore, you are maintaining. Habits have formed. Frugality feels less like punishment and more like alignment. You know why you are doing this, and that clarity reduces resistance. There may be moments of frustration, moments where progress feels slow, where saving large sums feels anticlimactic compared to the effort invested. This is where long-term thinking matters. You remind yourself that stability compounds invisibly. The benefits will not announce themselves, they will reveal themselves under pressure. And pressure will come. By June, when the wall reaches its intended height, you will feel something unfamiliar. Margin. Margin in your finances, margin in your thoughts, margin in your choices. Margin is the difference between reacting and responding, between surviving and strategizing. This is the point where most people realize they have never truly felt safe before. They confuse normality with security, paycheck with stability. The wall exposes the fragility of that illusion and replaces it with something real. Importantly, this phase also corrects a common misconception that money's primary purpose is growth. Growth is secondary. Money's first job is resilience. Without resilience, growth is fragile and short-lived. By the end of June, you are no longer building from fear. You are building from a position of relative calm. This calm is not complacency. It is readiness. It is the quiet confidence of knowing that if something breaks, you will not. The emergency wall does not make you wealthy, it makes you unbreakable enough to pursue wealth, and that distinction changes everything. When July arrives, you will not rush forward blindly, you will move deliberately, with resources, with patience, with the ability to wait for better opportunities instead of grabbing the first available one. July and August is where you earn that privilege. The wall stands not as a monument of caution, but as a platform. From here, you can finally build upward without fear of collapse. And now you are ready to invest. Section 4. July, August. Investing in earning power. By the time July arrives, the ground beneath you is no longer unstable. You are standing on something solid, not impressive, not luxurious, but reliable. For the first time in a long while, your decisions are not being made under pressure. This changes everything. Pressure narrows thinking, stability widens it. Now and only now does investment make sense. Most people misunderstand investing because they encountered it too early. They are introduced to it while they are still vulnerable, still reactive, still one surprise away from collapse. In that state, investing feels like gambling or hope disguised as strategy. Losses hurt more than they teach, gains feel accidental rather than earned. July and August exist to correct that mistake. The first investment you make is not in markets, assets, or trends. It is in capacity, your capacity to earn, your capacity to convert effort into income more efficiently than before. This is the investment with the highest return you will ever make, yet it is the one most people neglect because it doesn't look like investing in the way they were taught. Markets fluctuate, skills compound.
At this stage, you have something you did not have before: margin. You can afford to think in terms of leverage rather than survival. And the most reliable leverage available to you is increasing the value of your time. Time is the only resource you cannot replenish. Every hour you sell below its potential is a quiet loss that compounds across years. July and August are where you begin closing that gap deliberately. This does not require finding your passion. Passion is irrelevant here. What matters is demand. What skills are valued, transferable, and capable of increasing your income within months, not decades. You choose based on outcome, not identity. There's a maturity in this choice. You stop asking what you enjoy and start asking what works. Enjoyment often follows competence anyway. Mastery creates satisfaction more reliably than enthusiasm ever did. Spending money on skill acquisition can feel uncomfortable, especially after months of restraint. You have trained yourself to protect every dollar. Now you are asked to release some of them intentionally. This is where discernment matters. You are not spending to escape boredom or discomfort. You are allocating capital to raise your future baseline. You look at the math. You always look at the math. If a certification, course, or license costs money but raises your hourly rate meaningfully, the decision is not emotional, it is arithmetic. A short-term expense in exchange for long-term income expansion is not consumption, it is conversion. The same logic applies to tools. Tools are not indulgences when they multiply output, they are infrastructure. Owning the means by which you earn shifts power subtly but decisively in your favor. You become less dependent on permission, schedules, or singular employers. Even partial independence changes how you negotiate your time. July and August are also where you begin positioning yourself intentionally. Positioning is often misunderstood as networking in the shallow sense, exchanging cards, attending events, performing interest. Real positioning is quieter. It is placing yourself in environments where opportunity circulates naturally, where conversations contain information you did not previously have access to. This may feel unfamiliar. You may feel out of place at first. That discomfort is a signal of growth. You are entering rooms aligned with where you are going, not where you have been. Relationships formed during this period matter more than they initially appear. They may not pay immediately, they may not offer anything tangible at first, but over time they reshape what you see as possible. Exposure expands ambition. Ambition, when grounded, drives action. One of the most important shifts that occurs in July and August is internal. You stop thinking of yourself as someone trying to escape a bad situation and start thinking of yourself as someone building a stronger one. This shift is subtle but transformative. Scarcity thinking gives way to strategic thinking. You stop grasping and start planning. Importantly, you do not abandon caution. Your emergency wall remains intact. It is not touched. That boundary reinforces discipline. It reminds you that growth should never compromise resilience. You invest from surplus, not from fear. There is also restraint in what you do not invest in. This is the period where external noise becomes loud. You will hear about markets, trends, opportunities that promise speed and excitement. You will feel the urge to participate, but you recognize that premature diversification is a form of avoidance. You stay focused on the one investment that reliably pays,
yourself. These months are not about dramatic transformation. They are about upgrading your operating system. Small increases in income capability, when compounded over time, dwarf most speculative gains. A higher baseline changes every future calculation. As August ends, you should feel something distinct: momentum with direction. Not frantic movement, not blind optimism, but steady advancement backed by capability. You are not guessing anymore. You are building from evidence. This is the moment where many people finally understand why some individuals seem to progress faster than others. It is not luck, it is sequence. They invest in earning power before they invest in assets. They build the engine before buying the vehicle. By the time September arrives, you will not just have more money, you will have more optionality. You will be harder to trap, harder to replace, harder to ignore. And from that position, something new becomes possible. You can begin to build income that is not directly tied to hours. But that comes next.
This separation creates psychological space. You are no longer mentally cornered. You know that if something changes, you are not starting from zero again. That knowledge alone changes how you show up in negotiations, in decisions, in life. You become less compliant, not because you are arrogant, but because you are secure. Security is quiet. It does not announce itself. It simply alters behavior. By the end of October, you should not feel wealthy. You should feel unexposed. You have reduced your reliance on any one outcome. You have diversified not just your income, but your identity. You are no longer only what you do from 9 to 5. You are someone who owns pieces of systems that function independently of your presence. This is the beginning of true leverage. Most people never reach this point because they exhaust themselves earlier. They mistake survival for success and stop building once the pressure eases. You continue because you understand that freedom is not found in relief, but in structure. September and October do not complete the transformation, they signal it. They mark the moment where your financial life begins to grow roots instead of branches. Roots are invisible, but they determine what survives storms. As November approaches, something else will be tested. Not your ability to build, but your ability to hold. And that, as you are about to learn, is often harder. Section 6. November. Protecting progress and resisting collapse. November arrives quietly, but it carries more danger than any month before it. Not because conditions worsen, but because resistance weakens. By now, you have been disciplined for a long time. You have said no repeatedly. You have delayed gratification when others did not. And fatigue, more than temptation, becomes the real threat. This is where most progress dies. Not in moments of crisis, but in moments of comfort. Not because people fail, but because they relax too early. November is not dramatic, it is subtle. It whispers instead of shouts. It tells you that you have earned a break, that one exception will not matter, that you can loosen the rules just a little. That voice is persuasive because it is partially true. You have worked hard, you have made sacrifices, you have built something real. The danger is not acknowledging that effort. The danger is converting acknowledgement into permission. Permission to spend, permission to drift, permission to forget why the rules existed in the first place. November tests whether discipline was situational or internal. This month exposes a confusion many people carry their entire lives, the difference between earning money and having money. Income creates the illusion of abundance, but only retained income builds security. November is where that illusion becomes most convincing. Bonuses arrive, extra hours are worked, social pressure increases, and spending disguises itself as celebration. This is how entire years of effort are quietly erased. The financial damage of November is rarely catastrophic in isolation. It is cumulative. Small indulgences stack. One justification leads to another.
Suddenly, December begins with less margin, more stress, and the familiar sensation of regression. The collapse is not obvious until it is complete. Detecting progress in November requires clarity, not restriction. You are not forbidding yourself from joy, you are choosing timing. You are refusing to confuse momentum with arrival. You understand now that progress is fragile precisely when it feels secure. This is where emotional maturity matters more than financial knowledge. You prepare for November in advance, mentally if not formally. You remind yourself that this month is not about expansion, it is about preservation. You shift your focus from growth to defense, not because growth has ended, but because defense ensures it continues. One of the hardest parts of November is social expectation. Spending increases not out of desire, but obligation. Gifts, events, travel, each framed as normal, reasonable, deserved. Saying no feels awkward, explaining yourself feels exhausting, and so many people give in simply to avoid discomfort. But discomfort avoided now multiplies later. This phase demands quiet confidence. You do not argue with expectations, you do not justify your restraint, you simply hold your line. You recognize that boundaries are most meaningful when they are not announced, they are enacted. There may be moments when you feel isolated, when your choices set you apart, when others seem to move freely while you remain constrained. This is the cost of transition. You are no longer aligned with your past, but not yet fully integrated into your future. This in-between space is uncomfortable, but temporary. November is also a month of reflection, not emotional reflection, but analytical review. You look back at the previous 10 months with honesty. You assess what worked and what did not. You separate luck from skill. You identify patterns, both good and bad. This review is not about self-criticism, it is about calibration. Without calibration, repetition becomes stagnation. This review strengthens resolve. It reminds you how far you have come, not to encourage indulgence, but to reinforce responsibility. Progress is not something to be celebrated prematurely. It is something to be protected until it becomes permanent. Another subtle challenge of November is mental drift. With much of the hard work behind you, attention begins to wander. Focus softens, routine loosens. This is the difference between amateurs and professionals in every domain. Professionals do not rely on mood, they rely on process. By resisting collapse in November, you demonstrate a level of self-trust that many people never achieve. You prove to yourself that discipline is not conditional, that you can hold your position under pressure, that you are capable of seeing a year through, not just starting one. This proof changes your relationship with the future. You begin to believe in your own follow-through. Belief based on evidence is powerful. It reduces internal negotiation. Decisions become simpler because trust has been established. November does not offer applause, it offers something better: continuity. As the month ends, you may feel restrained, even restless. That is not failure, that is readiness. You are approaching a threshold. December is near, and with it, a reckoning. Not with loss, but with identity. Because the final step is not about money at all. It is about who you have become. Section 7. December. Integration, identity, and the second year. December arrives not as a finish line, but as a mirror. It reflects back what this year has actually made of you, not what you intended it to make you. By now, the noise has faded. The urgency that once dominated every decision has transformed into something quieter and more durable. You are no longer reacting to circumstances, you are operating within them. This is the real transformation. December is not a month of action in the traditional sense. It is a month of integration. Everything you built, resisted, learned, and endured over the past year converges here, not into a number, but into an identity. Numbers matter, but identity decides whether those numbers grow or decay in the years ahead. Most people never reach this stage consciously. They move from year to year without pause, carrying habits forward by default. December interrupts that momentum. It asks you to stop and look, not with judgment, but with clarity. You examine what no longer fits. The person who started this year needed strict rules because chaos was close. The person ending this year has structure. The rules did their job. Now you evaluate which ones become principles and which ones were temporary scaffolding. This distinction is crucial. Without it, discipline becomes rigidity. With it, discipline becomes wisdom. You look at your finances not with anxiety, but with comprehension. You understand your numbers. You know what supports you and what drains you. This knowledge is calm. It does not demand reaction. It invites strategy. But December is not just about reviewing systems. It is about recognizing change at a deeper level. You notice how your relationship with money has shifted. It is no longer emotional in the
same way. Money is no longer a measure of self-worth or security. It is a tool, and tools are meant to be used intentionally. This shift did not happen overnight. It emerged slowly through repetition, restraint, and follow-through. It is the accumulation of hundreds of small decisions that aligned with a long-term vision rather than short-term relief. December also brings a quiet reckoning with identity. You are not who you were in January. That person operated from fear, urgency, and limited options. The current version of you operates from stability, patience, and optionality. This does not make you superior. It makes you responsible. Responsibility is the true marker of progress. With responsibility comes choice, and with choice comes risk, not the reckless kind, but the strategic kind. December is where you begin thinking not about survival, but about trajectory. You ask different questions now, not how do I avoid collapse, but what direction do I want this to compound in? This is the threshold between defense and offense. Year 1 was about stabilization. Year 2 is about expansion. But expansion without intention leads to fragmentation. December ensures that expansion is grounded. You do not rush forward, you design. You reflect on what energizes you versus what merely pays. You consider which skills you want to deepen, which systems you want to scale, which opportunities deserve attention. You do not chase everything, you choose deliberately. Focus becomes a privilege earned through discipline. There is also a subtle emotional component to December. Pride emerges, but it is quiet, not celebratory, not performative. It is the satisfaction of having honored a commitment to yourself. Many people live entire lives without experiencing this feeling. It is not loud, but it is stabilizing. You also acknowledge the cost, the isolation at times, the fatigue, the discomfort of saying no. This acknowledgement is important. It prevents romanticizing the process and prepares you for future challenges. Growth is not painless, but pain endured consciously becomes strength. As you plan the second year, you do so from a place of coherence. Your goals align with your values. Your strategies align with your temperament. You are no longer copying paths that belong to others. You are constructing one that fits. This is where the real work begins. The first year taught you how to build a foundation. The second year will teach you how to build upward without losing balance. You now have buffers, systems, and skills that allow you to take calculated risks. You are no longer forced into action by scarcity. You can wait, assess, and move when conditions align. December also redefines success. It is no longer measured by external validation or comparison. It is measured by continuity, by the ability to maintain progress without constant strain, by the confidence that comes from knowing you can handle disruption without collapse. This confidence changes how you show up in the world. You speak differently. You listen differently. You negotiate differently. You are not aggressive. You are grounded. Grounded people are difficult to manipulate.
As the year closes, there is no dramatic ending, no sudden arrival, and that is the point. Real change does not announce itself. It integrates quietly until it becomes normal. You enter the next year not as someone trying to fix their life, but as someone building one. That distinction is everything. You understand now that wealth is not a moment or a milestone. It is a direction maintained over time. And direction, once set correctly, compounds even when progress feels slow. The year is over, the work is not. But now you are ready. Not because everything is perfect, because you are no longer fragile. And that is how long-term wealth actually begins.